Welcome to episode 32 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm going to be interviewing screenwriter Brian D. Young. Brian has carved out a great career for himself. He lives in Canada and always has, and his career started without the benefit of an agent or manager. In the interview, he goes into great details about exactly what he did to get his career going and how he keeps it going more than a decade later. I'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, Screencraft. Screencraft is dedicated to helping screenwriters master the craft of screenwriting and succeed in the business of Hollywood. Sign up for free education and inspiration at screencraft.org. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the episode on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast. If you have any questions or comments about anything, feel free to drop me an email at info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. I want to improve this podcast, so some honest, constructive feedback is always very much appreciated. I'd like to thank Craig Mack, Bharat Gakis, Mark Beddard, the Hippo Critics, Brandon Rhines, Tracy Nell, and Jason Spellman for all retweeting episode 31. Thank you guys for that. And I want to thank Stanford Crane, Abe Arde, Sherelle Kana, and Jazz Dino Tinks, who left me some nice reviews over on YouTube. Thank you for those comments. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast. Just look for episode 32. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address, and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process for how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. I'm just about finished with a limited location sci-fi thriller spec script that I've mentioned on the podcast a few times before. I should be ready to blast that out by the end of August. I was really motivated by talking with Joe Gasm in episode 30 and hearing how he will come up with 80 or 90 log lines before he begins a new script. So I'm trying to really ramp up my log line production. As soon as I get this spec done, I'm going to start spending a lot of time really trying to pound out a bunch of log lines. Hopefully by the end of August, I'll have 100 or so. So we'll see. I really do believe that making sure your concept is rock solid is the smartest thing you can do. And while it's not easy, if you take the time to do it, it can compensate for other shortcomings that you might end up having in your script. Also, a film I wrote last year, Ninja Apocalypse, was released this past week. It's a low-budget martial arts film. It's direct-to-video, so it's available through all the normal video and on-demand channels. It's on Amazon.com and also available on Walmart and Walmart.com. It's not necessarily very representative of the sorts of stuff I typically write, but it was a good writing assignment, so I took it. This is definitely a true genre film. If you like martial arts movies, I would say definitely check it out. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter Brian D. Young. Here is the interview. Welcome, Brian, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to chat with you.
So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of your career in the entertainment industry, kind of how you got to where you are today.
All right. Well, going not too far back into the past, I was at university and, doing the university thing, not sure what to take, and ended up with one degree and a wife and a couple of kids, and thought I needed to get into a career that made some money. So I entered law school and poked around in law school, ended up with a degree and ended up practicing law. But throughout all of that, I was writing. Like, it was just it was in my blood, as they say. Even going back to elementary school in grade 6, I did the school newspaper. It was full of typos. It was so badly full of typos, they had to run a contest to see who could find all the typos, and then I had to go out for lunch with them, which was okay when you're in grade 6. But I was just, like, when I think back, it was always courses that had to do with writing. I liked doing essays and short stories and that kind of stuff. And same thing through university and even law school. I avoided exams and tried to get a course that had an essay instead of an exam. And then once I finished law school, I was pretty focused on doing that. Like, practiced law, did criminal law and litigation stuff, but was writing. And I think I had that vision, as many lawyers do, that I would write a novel. So I started a novel, and it still sits in a drawer about 50% done. And every now and then I pull it out and go, wow, that was really bad. But I was in the midst of that novel, and a friend of mine worked as an AD, like was first AD, and had done like lots of great features and stuff. And we were talking one day, and she said, you should try writing a screenplay. And I never had written a screenplay. I'd never really seen one. So I did, the quick little search online, found out what they looked like. And using Microsoft Word, I tabbed my way through a screenplay and got some interest in it. I mean, the problem was I picked a screenplay that was a true story based on a fascinating event that happened, but I didn't have the rights. And being a lawyer, I was, a little bull-chested, kind of like, well, we don't need the rights. We can just tell the story. So I got some interest in it, and all of a sudden I was starting to realize that I think I can do this. Continued to practice law, and so would sort of be staying up into the middle of the night, just because I am a bit of a night owl, working on different scripts and stuff like that. And then wrote a feature film called Love for Rent, and put that online through a thing called Inktip, which it had a different name back then. I can't remember what it was called. It's Script Network or something like that. And somebody phoned me, like a cold call, and says, I want to buy your script. And I'm thinking, like, no, you're lying. And he offered me $35,000 for my script. And I thought, wow, I could be a screenwriter. So I was still practicing at this time, and I sold the script, cut a deal with the guy, and before you know it, it was sort of in pre-production, and they made the thing down in LA, and kind of B-list people in it, but it ended up being a really good story. And that sort of made me realize that I can get into screenwriting and be able to leave law. So I did the cold turkey thing, and I quit the practice of law and shocked everybody, including my wife. Because I decided, no, I'm going to do this. Like I've reached a point, been there, done that in the legal world, and the screenwriting thing, I loved every minute of it. And so quit and then focused on writing, and didn't make any money for about a year and a half after that. Which is the reality of the business. You can have a great hit, and then all of a sudden there's nothing.
Mm-hmm. So let's stop there for a minute, and let me just kind of dig into a few things. So when you were practicing law and you got your law degree, what you said you were always writing. What were you writing at that point? Just short stories, just fiction, nonfiction, your novel? What other stuff were you writing?
Short story stuff, working on the novel, not even thinking about screenplays. Like it was. And not even.
Were you trying to sell some of the short stories, or at least get them into some publication or market them in any way?
No, and I think that's why it was a shock to everybody when I then decided to get into the screenwriting thing and then had that quick sale. Because I hadn't done any of that before. It's not like I was dabbling my toes into trying different things in the writing world. I literally went cold turkey into it. And the big spark that drove it was that big sale.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned your first script that you did not have the rights to, and you said you got some interest. Who did you get this interest from?
Well, what I was able to do was, through my friend, I was able to contact a couple of producers, and I pitched this to them, and they immediately started to, they'd heard about the story, they liked the idea of the story, and they took a look at the script. I mean, when I go back and look at the script, I realize how bad it was. Like, it was written on Microsoft Word, and I tried to line up all the tabs as best I could. But it really, like, in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe people looked at that. But it does tell me one thing that, and now for everything I've done since then, I think producers really like to say that it's so much about a polished script and there better not be any typos. Story is so key. And what I had captured in that very first script was a phenomenal story, very badly told in my writing and in the formatting of my screenplay. But it was the story that was drawing people. And I think that was a good lesson for me to sort of realize that if you have a good story, people are going to be drawn to it.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your transition. I think this is a thing that a lot of people struggle with. They have a full-time job. You mentioned that your wife was surprised. Was your wife supportive? And you know, how did you tell her? How did that all kind of go down?
It's a good question, because it really was a shock to the system, I think, because you've got this really good career, and lawyers do well. I mean, financially, it's a good career. I wasn't rolling in. I didn't have the Mercedes and all that kind of big mansion kind of stuff, but I did well. Like, I was having a good career. So to jump from that was even more surprising. But I just really believed that I could do it. And it took a little convincing of my family to get to that point. And then having, a bit of a dry run after that, they're kind of like, seriously, so you left that 6-figure job to go and be a what? So I think that this reality sinks in after a while. But I meet a lot of writers. Like, there's a number of writers that I talk to and help, and I'll meet with, and to guide them along whatever process they're at, whether they're writing a log line or an outline or even a script or something like that. And a lot of them do have other jobs, and a lot of them really, really want to do it. And I think that when you get to the point that you really believe in yourself and you've got that passion, you make the jump and you do it. And in this day and age, I don't think you need to make the jump and move to LA. And I go down to LA. I spent a lot of time down there. I live up on the west coast of Canada in Vancouver, just outside of Vancouver. So getting to LA is easy. I've been down there. I've done a meeting in the afternoon and flown home that night. Like, I've done a day trip to LA, which is nice and easy. But you don't need to be there. And I think that you can sort of live wherever you live and still access that network of stuff. But it takes time. I mean, and you've got to make those contacts. Doing that allowed me to sort of stay within the security of what I built here for my family, because my kids were young at the time. I mean, like, we're talking 10, 12 years ago that I did it. So it was a bit of a risk, but in the long term, it's paid off really well.
Mm-hmm. And so did you have some money saved? I mean, like, you knew you could go without a paycheck for, 6 months or a year or 2 years. Did you have some money saved up to kind of support things?
No. And that's like, when I've got a very close friend of mine, and I remember the night that I sold my first screenplay, the one I got the phone call from the guy in LA and offered me $35,000. And it was a non-guild deal. The first one was, I didn't even know about the guild. I knew there was some writers union thing or something like that. I didn't know anything about it. And I remember there was this long silence when I told my friends that we were opened a bottle of wine or something, and I told them I was doing this. And they're just kind of looking at me, and then they look at my wife, and they're kind of like, seriously? Like, where'd this come from? So no, and I didn't. And that was, you get that first sale, and you've got the money, and you celebrate a little bit. And then you think, well, it's just going to roll in from here. Like, now, Sony's going to phone me, and Fox is going to phone me, and all this stuff's going to be amazing. And they didn't. My phone did not ring. So yeah, you take the financial hit, but again, I persevered. And I know maybe I was stupid, but it's worked out really, really well for me. But I totally understand that when people are in that sort of the balancing, like, I'm doing this job during the day, but I'm writing all night long, but I really wanted to, be a writer. It's hard. And I think in the end, because I had a supportive family, that I was able to do it. But I took the jump. I really, really thought I could do it. And so I'm going through customs, heading down to the States not that long ago. And I end up going through U.S. customs in Vancouver. And there's a bit of a delay because I do go down to L.A. a fair bit. So my passport's got a lot of stamps on it. They look me up online, and they see me going back and forth. And so the customs guy says, you're going down there to work. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm going down there to do some meetings, but I don't work down there, because then it gets into the whole issue of the green card and all that kind of stuff. And I'm looking at my watch going, I am going to miss my plane. And he's firing questions at me. And a few trips before, they'd sent me into the glass room where they let you sit and stew for a while. And then for no reason at all, you hear a voice over the PA system that you're free to go, and you run and try to catch your plane. I was worried I was going to get put in the glass room. And again, there's just, I don't know why these guys are like that, but they're doing it. So he then says to me, well, what do you do? I said, well, I work in the film business. I'm a writer. And he looks at me and he says, I've got a friend who's a writer. And as soon as he said that, I realized this is my ticket to catch my plane. And I wrote on a piece of paper really quickly my email address, and I said, you have your friend send me the script, and I'll take a look at it. And that bought me the immediate, straight go and go home kind of thing and head off to the plane. And I figured as I'm running down to the plane that I am way smarter than that guy on border security because I'll never hear from the other guy. So I arrive in LA 2 hours later, and I have an email on my phone with a script attached to it from a customs officer in Florida with his script. And he works, probably horrendous 12-hour shifts, like nights and days, and he's writing. And he wrote such a good script, I bought it, sold it a month later, and it was made.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, and I tell that story for a couple of reasons. One, it's a good story. And two, here's a guy who's working shift work who really wants to be a writer. And just through the luck of it kind of thing, he now has a credit.
Now, did you read this story and you recognized that you had contacts, like producer contacts, that would, go bananas over this type of a story? Or what was sort of it was just such a compelling story, you felt confident you could sell it?
Yeah, and I was at the point, like I've been able to transition. And I wouldn't say I'm a producer. I have producer credits, but the real producers give you those just to shut you up. So, but I'm not a producer in any stretch of the imagination. I'm a writer. But what I'll do is I will buy a script that I really like and then cut a deal with the writer that I'll guarantee them a credit, but I'm going to rewrite them because I think I can set it up, or I'll work something out when I try to set it up. Because over the years I have developed such phenomenally good contacts that I can, if it helps them and helps me, I can get this moving. And this particular script, at the time, I was in the heavy Lifetime movie of the week mode, and I was writing stuff and pitching stuff. Like I was selling pitches over the phone when the Lifetime a couple of years ago was going through this frenzy of buying stuff. They wanted anything to do with a suburban housewife in jeopardy, and you could just think of every possible scenario to put a suburban housewife in, and they were buying these things. And it was at that time that I sort of had this customs border guy send me his script. And super nice guy, he's got a wife and a couple of kids living down in Florida. The timing was great. I ended up optioning it very quickly, and then we got the thing made.
And it was a suburban housewife in jeopardy script?
Yeah, well, it was. And he wrote it as a feature because there is that perception that is the best way to go. And absolutely, getting a studio film or something like that is great. But as I tell a lot of sort of writers starting out and stuff like that, or even mid-career writer kind of thing, that's tough. Those sales are, they happen, but they're few and far between. Right now, the things that are moving really, really quickly is anything on TV. And that was sort of that time for this guy. And I said to him, I really like the script. It needs, it was 65 pages. It needs a few pages. But the story's great, and I think with a bit of a rewrite and some work, this thing could be set up and could get made. But it's a TV movie. I said it is not a feature film, and he agreed.
Huh, great. So let's back up a little bit and let's talk about Love for Rent. Maybe just kind of go through the process of how you got that one sold.
Sure. So with Love for Rent, I came up with this idea that it would be really interesting if a woman is hired to be a surrogate for a family, and just sort of everything that goes with that. So I wrote the script as a kind of comedy, romantic comedy kind of thing, and I didn't know what to do with it. I mean, the producers that I had met on my first script, the sort of the drama before that, I didn't think it was a good fit. So I just was poking around online, and I found at that time what was Scriptwriters Network, or the precursor to Inktip. And I don't know what you paid, like $30 or something like that, and you put the script up online. And I still use Inktip to this day. Like if I've got projects that are sitting or that I've optioned that I want to re-option or something, it is a phenomenal resource. And I say that not because I'm paid by Inktip to say that. It really is. Like, they do such a good job. I've met a couple of the people when I'm down in LA. I've gone for lunch with some of the guys that work for Gerald LeBaron, who runs the thing. They do a great job. And what I put the script up on that, I put Love for Rent up on that very, very quickly. Within 2 or 3 weeks, people were downloading the log line and downloading the outline and stuff. And then there was a guy in LA who read it and phoned me out of the blue. And to this day, I really don't know how he got my phone number, but he phoned me and made me an offer on the phone to buy the script. And I didn't even negotiate. Like, I thought I had died and gone to heaven.
So tell me, how many scripts over the course of your career now have you, sold through Inktip?
Well over 30. Like, I wouldn't even hesitate to say 40.
And we're talking sales here, not just options. How many options would you say you had?
Sorry, I'm talking everything together. So sales and options.
Okay. And writing assignments. So writing assignments, options, and sales.
So
you're talking maybe 30.
All of that stuff. I would say 40 different deals, whether it's a commission work, whether it's an option, whether it's an outright sale through Inktip. I mean, there's one particular script. I wrote this family comedy that I've used as a writing sample, but I've put it on Inktip a number of times. And I've probably optioned that single script 4 times through Inktip. One day it will get made if I don't make it myself. But it's just, people are really drawn to it. They love the story, but it's like so many things in this business, they just can't get it off the ground. And then, the option, and I used to give a long option. I don't anymore. Like, I've learned a ton in that, right? My agent insists on that kind of stuff. But even Inktip, in the sense that, through Inktip, I had an agent down in LA. I had a manager in LA I got through Inktip. So, no, it's been a great resource. There are other online ways of doing it. Blacklist has one. A couple others, I think. I've used Blacklist a little bit, but I don't think it's as good as Inktip. I don't think for whatever reason, producers are drawn to the Inktip mode online. And it works. And I've also, as a producer, so this writer/producer, I've accessed Inktip from the producer side as well, and it's quite slick. Like, the way it works and the access it gives you is quite amazing. If there was
Let's talk a minute. I'm sorry to cut you off. Let's talk a minute about the options through Inktip. What can someone kind of expect? I mean, I've had some near misses on Inktip too, and there's generally not a lot of money for options. And someone who's had as much success as you on Inktip, I'd really be curious, even just for my own sake, just to hear what you can expect from the option. Maybe give us some tips on how you how you negotiate these options and what you can realistically expect.
Okay. Let's say you're starting out. So when I started out, I would have, and I did for the first couple of years, do a free option. Every producer wants an option for free, and I totally get that. Like, I really understand how the business works. It's hard as a writer to do a free option. And what I've done over the years, I mean, now done by my agent, and has been for years, stagger the option. Say, okay, I'll give you 3 months for free. But after 3 months, you're going to give me $500, and then after 6 months, you're going to give me another $500. And if you have that kind of if the producer will agree, if you have that kind of stagger option, it does push the producer a little bit to try and get this going. If someone signs a 2-year free option, they have no incentive to do anything until 1 year, 11 months, and 29 days. And a bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent tip, and I've experimented with that too. The other nice thing about that is most of the time the producers in the early stages, they think they're going to raise the money for this thing a lot quicker than they do. So they're usually reasonably happy about they're agreeable to doing that, because generally when you talk to them early on, they think they're going to have the money very, very quickly, even though realistically it's going to drag out for months. But they're eternal optimists, just like writers.
Oh, they are. And again, you have to, as a writer, you've got to appreciate both sides of the business. And if you're starting out, take a free option. Don't do a 2-year free option. If you've been around for a while, then you understand how it works, and you want to make sure that the producer does something with it. And again, that's kind of step option deal is good. But you also, I've turned down options where people want a spec script for free, or they want an option for free, or something like that. I'm lucky in my position that I can go no, but it's also quite empowering to say no, because if you've got a producer who says, I really like this, I'm going to do something with it, it's going to be a feature, and we're going to go to Cannes, we're going to do all this stuff, but I want it for free. No. And if you say no, you feel, wow, I think I'm a bit of a player here. And if one producer likes it, there's a dozen others who just haven't read it yet, and they're going to like it. But again, it depends on where you are in your career, because you want to get noticed, you want to get stuff moving, you want to have a resume. And very early on in my career, I would take anything that came in the door. I would rewrite a horror film. I would it didn't matter what genre it was. I'd be jumping all over the place because I knew that I had to get that resume built and get it built quickly to give me credibility.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of budgets are most of these films on Inktip that you've been involved with? And that sort of segues to, how much realistically a screenwriter can expect to earn if one of these things sells.
It varies. So I've got budgets, everything from the $750,000 lifetime stuff. And that's what they say the budget is, but we know it's more than that. Up to $50 million. Like, it really depends. Like, I've got everything from big action, like multiple $1 million action deals, to smaller movie of the week stuff, to I just optioned a series, like a network drama kind of thing. So that's a multi-million-dollar deal if that ever goes, if it ever sees the light of day. So it's all over the board. And when they go ahead, it just depends on what you can negotiate. And keep in mind that what the producer's going to keep trying to chop you down. So for the sake of argument, let's say you sell a Lifetime movie of the week, and they're still being bought up. Lifetime's changed the tone they're looking for right now, but it's a machine that's got to be fed to Hallmark and Lifetime because they produce a lot of these kind of movies. And the producer's going to tell you, well, what you're looking at here is probably a budget of $750,000 to 1.5, so it's a non-guild deal. Well, there's no reason that can't be a guild deal, but if you're prepared to do a non-guild kind of project, like you're not a member or something like that, which is all good. I know lots of writers who make a ton of money that still don't belong to the guild. They're going to offer you anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000, and they're going to start as low as they can. And again, it depends on where you are, and it depends on, I've had this script for 5 years, I've never optioned it, I got someone who's willing to take a swing at it, and they're only going to pay me $10,000. That might be worth it, because that's a produced credit. Like, there's a value in what it brings you other than the cash, right?
Mm-hmm. Are you in the Writers Guild?
I am.
Okay, and have you found that has hurt you with some of these deals on Inktip? Do you find producers will sometimes say, forget it, I'm not going to do a guild deal?
Sometimes. And it really depends. I mean, I guess I can only speak from my experience, but from what I've heard, there are lots of writers who are in the guild and do non-guild projects. They do it either under a pseudonym or they just do it. Because the reality is there are way more non-guild jobs than there are guild jobs. And as a writer, it depends if you want to make a living at it or be, a believer that I only do guild work. You might be an unemployed guild writer or an employed guild writer who does non-guild work. And again, I'm not, I don't want to get the guild or anybody mad at me, but I think that's just the reality of it. And I do know writers who have done stuff that is non-guild because they want the money. And the guilds know that. I mean, whether it's the WGC up in Canada or the WGA down in the States, they know that happens. And I've also had deals where I've had in the deal, like, I understand this is a non-guild project. You got a budget of $1.2 million. Your budget goes above 1.5, it becomes a guild deal. And I've yet to have a producer refuse to do that.
Uh-huh. Have you ever heard of the guild going after writers that did non-guild work?
Yes.
And what do? Do they get kicked out of the guild, or they just pay a fine? No,
there's that threat, but the problem is because so many writers do it that they know what happens, and the guilds they're trying to, they want to keep their membership up, they want to keep their members happy. Ideally, every single screenwriter in the world is a guild member. That's good for everybody other than the producer. So I had a guild come back at me once. They don't go after the producers because they've got no jurisdiction over the producer, and so they come back after the writer. And it was not even a slap on the wrist kind of thing. And I said, you know, it's been 6 months. I hadn't had any work. I took this non-guild deal. I knew it was non-guild. I have a great relationship with the producer. I have no issue with what's happened. And they're kind of like, okay. And I think if that happened a lot, they would raise the alarm bells. But it happens. And I mean, the alternative is you do it under a pseudonym. But the problem with the pseudonym is, you know, how are you going to justify the credit?
Yeah. Part of what you're doing these movies for is the credit, so doing it under pseudonym kind of nulls that value out.
It does. Yeah, it totally does. I mean, there's an IMDb, there's different ways to, whatever your name is or however you work it. But it's a tough issue. I mean, I wish from the outset that I was Guild right from the start, because the Guild projects are great projects. There's no two ways about it. You're protected so many different ways, all the benefits, like it's the best way to go. But it is a much bigger budget project that you've got to be involved in.
So let's talk about a bit more about Inktip. You said obviously you've had great success as a writer, and you've also logged in as a producer. As someone who's had a lot of success, can you give us some tips on how we could potentially use Inktip and maybe sell some of our scripts? Are there things that you see that writers are doing wrong when you log in as a producer?
Oh yeah. Oh no, it's unbelievable. And the thing to keep in mind is that first up, there are thousands of scripts on Inktip. It's a great business model because there are a lot of people that get their newsletter, whether it's the paid newsletter or the non-paid newsletter. There's a lot of scripts online. Like when you put out a request, I put requests out for something, and the responses are unbelievable. And then like you could literally have 500 scripts in your inbox the next day. I have seen, when I've requested scripts, and I've talked to producers about this, they'll say, I got 250 responses to my request, like a producer says that, and 225 of the 250 scripts weren't finished. And I've seen that. And as a writer, your credibility is so key. And when you put a script up online, if you email it to a producer, if you drop it off at their office, it needs to be about 100 pages. 65 pages doesn't cut it. And I've even seen a script that hits the 65-page mark. You turn the page and it says, I'll write the rest of the script if you like the story. And you're kind of like, seriously? Seriously? I'm going to... And even if it's a good story, you've just pissed the person off now. So that's the first thing is, like, it's got to be a finished script, and it's got to be tight in the sense that, if someone... I met for coffee the other day. They'd written something and wanted me to have a look at it. And she emailed it to me, and it was a 145-page comedy. Comedies are not even 100 pages these days. And I met with her, and I said, like, had you not read another script? She said, well, yeah, I have, but I really thought that, this needed to, be this length. And I'm like, people don't buy scripts over 110 pages. Like, you've got to cut 30 to 40 pages from this script. And again, the script is too long, the outline's too long, the log line's too long. There's all of those kind of things that send a signal to the producer that you don't quite get this. And with Inktip, or whatever the online one you use is, if you've had it up there for a few weeks and you're getting some log line views but nothing beyond that, you've got to rewrite that log line. It's not like, well, I think it's great and I'm going to wait because someone's going to see it. Hundreds of people have seen it, and it's not working for anybody. And they're, a log line, I've spent a week on a log line. Like, they're so key, but when you've got a really good log line, like, it resonates with you. And write them down. Like, I keep a file of different log lines for different scripts, log lines that have worked. So there's a way that Inktip isn't a chore. Like, you can hone down your outline, hone down your log line, make sure your script is polished, so that when you do submit it or you do put stuff up online, it's just a cut and paste kind of thing. And absolutely typo free.
Sure.
And again, everybody says that, but I can't tell you how true it is. When I'm online and I'm looking at a script, or a new writer sends me a script and says, hey, will you take a look at this for me? And if in the first couple pages it is full of errors and formatting issues, I stop. And I know everybody else that's reading it will too. Because it just shows that you're not there yet.
Yeah, those are great tips for sure. So you mentioned that you had used the blacklist a little bit. I wonder if you can kind of just talk a little bit about your experience on that. I know right now that's a big site that writers are experimenting with. I have not had a lot of success with it myself. So I wonder if you can talk about sort of what you've done and some of the ratings you've got and what you've seen, if anything, from it.
Well, what I've done with Blacktip, I played around with it a bit. Played around with it with producers as well. So, for example, if I'm working with a producer that wants to get another producer on board or kind of try to attract a studio level kind of thing, and my agent for whatever reason can't get the script in, or we've tried or something like that, I've experimented with Blacklist in the sense I put a script up, I've paid the $50 and bought the reader review, trying to see what happens. And I don't know quite what it is about Blacklist, whether it is the way their model is, if it's not quite working. But I think there can be a problem unless you get a really good reader. And readers, you know what it's like. You can watch a TV show or read a book or read a script one day. You can read it again the next day, and it's way better or way worse. That happens to individual readers, and across the board of 50 readers that happens. I think you're going to have to shop quite a bit to get a really good reader report. And I think with Blacklist, if you get a good reader report, it will help with the views. Without that, you're not going to get the random views that you would get on Inktip. And even Blacklist says on, I think, their homepage, they've got over 4,000 scripts registered. Like, that's what you're up against there. So it's a numbers game, isn't it?
Yeah. So have you ever tried, like you mentioned you're working with a producer, have you ever tried to get that producer to log in as a producer and rate your script highly? Because that's something that has occurred to a lot of people, and I've seen it talked about in forums and stuff, is that kind of stuffing the ballot box. If your agent is a member of the Blacklist as an agent, she could potentially log in or get her friends to. Have you experimented with anything like that?
I haven't done that. We've talked about it, but then we're kind of like, nah, it's sort of, yes, it's cheating, and lots of people cheat. But as soon as someone reads the script, they're going to go, well, that's fake. And I think it's unfortunate because it does undermine Blacklist. And so when I said earlier that I'm not quite sure their format's right, that's a risk that they run that you don't get on Inktip. And I think that how you can legitimize that is tough. I think it's a double-edged sword. Having the reader review is good. But also people can stack it. And, if you want to get some interest in your script, you can do that on Blacklist. And I think a lot of people do. But it's the same. Look at IMDb. For $10 a month, you can get your IMDb rating up. Everything is purchasable.
Yeah. So let's talk a minute about your experience with agents and managers. I think there's a kind of a common misconception among new writers that once you get an agent, it's all gravy train and the agent will basically bring you lots of work. I mean, it sounds like you have an agent and you've continued to, beat the pavement and that kind of thing. Can you kind of maybe tell us your experience with agents and managers? Has it helped them? Have they actually sold some scripts for you, gotten you work?
Really good question, and it is a bit of a misconception. Agents are deal makers; they're not necessarily work getters. I mean, yes, I've had a couple of agents, I've had a couple of different managers. I think you need to use them as negotiators, but you still have to work as hard as, if not harder than they do, because they've got a corral of writers that they're representing. They'll have their favorite writers, the ones that are generating a lot of income that they need to keep super happy. And you've got to work just as hard. You've got to, get some meetings set up, get your scripts out there, do what you need to do to get your career going, in tandem with your agent and manager. And I had one agent right after my first deal. I got an agent because of the first deal, which was great. And I had him for a number of years. Really nice guy, like good agent. Wasn't super productive in terms of meetings or getting me work, but he was there to negotiate the deals when I got them done. I've had a manager in LA at a pretty good management place who kind of did nothing but sort of take 10% off every deal I brought in. But you learn that way, right? And that can be a bit of a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And your agents and managers work for you, and you've got to, if they're not, move on, because everybody does.
Mm-hmm. So aside from Inktip, are there any other channels, or do you have any other success stories sort of from other things that you did to sell or option or get a writing assignment?
It's contacts. It really is. And I'm not a kind of go to a cocktail party kind of guy, because I'm an obnoxious drunk. But I do find those kind of situations not the best thing or the best way to meet people. I've seen people work a room and kind of like, wow, I wish I could be like that, but I'm not. Like, I'm way more of a wallflower in that way. But if you do meet somebody, following up with them with an email, it's amazing how, you get an email from a producer you haven't heard from in 5 years, and you're kind of scratching your head going like, how the hell did I meet that person? And they just offered you a guild deal to do a rewrite on a project. Every person you meet could be somebody down the road that can give you work. I sold a pitch to a network in Canada, and the woman who bought the pitch was the receptionist at another producer's office that I met 8 years ago. And she's now the head of development at this network. And she and I got along really well, and when I saw her again, it was amazing. So I think that's really, really key. So outside of Inktip, just your day-to-day life, and even through Inktip, when you meet a producer, following up with them, and if they look at your script and say, hey, it's not for me, that doesn't mean they don't like you. It doesn't mean they don't like the script, but you're just going to put that name off to the side. You're going to drag that email and put it in a hold file or whatever you do, and you're going to follow up 6 months later saying, hey, you read my script, and, if you're looking for anything, let me know. And you'd be shocked how often people come back to you because of that contact.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious. So where do you, like the receptionist that you met who eventually went on to be, to move up and buy this pitch, how did you happen to meet her and get friendly with her?
So that particular producer, I got into that office. That was a rewrite on a Warner Brothers project a number of years ago, a family film. And that producer in LA hired a producer in Vancouver who invited me over for lunch. I went for lunch, but to go for lunch, I had to pass this receptionist, and then was hired on this rewrite deal, and sort of over the space of the rewrite had talked to her to talk to him kind of thing. And it's one of those names in your quiver that you pull out when you need to. And then when I heard she was head of development, I had this pitch, shot her off an email saying, hey, haven't seen you in years, and just bumped into the producer you used to work for, and it'd be great if I could get together and pitch this to you. And she emails you back because she knows you. Like, it's not a cold call email anymore, right? And the next thing you know, you're in Toronto pitching and they buy it.
Yeah. So great tips. So let's talk, just sort of take a step back and some sort of macro view of the screenwriting career. What's been the highest point of your career, so far?
Today, doing a podcast. It's about as good as it gets, actually.
Aside from the podcast, what's been the real highlight of your career?
There's been a lot. And the thrill of walking on set and knowing it's your movie. And there's nothing like it. There is nothing like it. And to hear an actor speak your words, and you sort of look at the person beside you and go, I don't know if I quite wrote it that way, but I think that's what I wrote. It's cool. And hanging out by the craft services, like free candy, that's as good as it gets. But just seeing that happen and seeing, like, I remember the first time I went on set for something I'd written, like I was spellbound. Like it was magical. And even to this day, like I'll go and hang out and try to keep as low a profile as I can because directors just don't like writers. And it's really, really fun to see. So those are always highlights, but also when you're, it can be the middle of the day or the middle of the night and you're working away on a script and you've written this character, some dialogue, and you just know that's it. You just have that moment where you go, wow, like that's a great scene. I love that. I absolutely love that.
Mm-hmm. So, and then we'll take the sort of the flip side. I mean, this is a really tough business and everyone has lots of war stories. So what's been some of maybe just the low point, the low point of your career?
Months of no work. And you're kind of like, maybe I did make a big bad decision. Those can be hard because they're psychologically you're thinking I'm a failure, but you're not. You just have to keep going. And through those, the months of not getting any paid work, I'm rewriting scripts on my own. I'm pitching. I'm on Inktip. I'm doing whatever, the blacklist, whatever, talking to my agent, just trying to get stuff going. Those can be hard because those emotionally really beat you up because you think this is not right and no one's gonna ever hire you again. Low points can also be you get screwed by a producer, and unfortunately we do. And 99.9% of all the producers I've met are amazing. And I'm not just saying that because everyone loves everybody in LA. They really are. There are a few producers out there that are just horrible people, and they screw you. And that's unfortunate. And those can be very, very frustrating times. But your skin gets thickened a bit, and you just keep your head down and keep going. And as a writer, your reputation is key. It really, really is.
Mm-hmm. So what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing and potentially maybe even contact you?
I think there's an email address on IMDb, which, in fairness to people who listen to the podcast, is the one I check every now and then. So in other words, it's my spare email address. But yeah, no, I love it.
Are you on Twitter or you have a website or blog or anything?
No, I don't. And not Twitter. I used to be on Facebook, and I ended up, it just got a little bit weird, the people that contacted me, so I got off of Facebook.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram. I love Instagram. But, yeah, and I don't want to be inundated with scripts, but everybody's looking for stuff. Everyone's looking for great stories. And then I feel I've been so fortunate, and I've had such a great career. I'm not even halfway through it, I hope. But I've had such a great career. I love helping people out, and I'm always happy to chat about it and say what I think of the business.
Perfect. So, yeah, you've been really generous with your time. This has been very informative. I know I've learned a lot, so I think you've given some great tips for screenwriters.
Oh, no, I've really enjoyed it, and your website, your blog, it's great stuff. I really, really enjoy looking at it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to be running another online class called Writing a Great Ending to Your Screenplay. If you have a great ending for your screenplay, it'll leave a lasting impression to the reader that your screenplay is good. But if you don't deliver on the ending, the reader is going to finish with the lingering doubts about the quality of your screenplay. I'm going to be diving into the third acts and dissecting the endings from a whole bunch of great movies, including The Graduate, Rocky, Pulp Fiction, Memento, Planet of the Apes, Shawshank Redemption, Seven, The Sixth Sense, Citizen Kane, The Usual Suspects, and many, many others. If you're having trouble with your ending or simply want to learn more about what it takes to write a great ending, check out this class. The live class will be Saturday, August 23rd at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/classes. But if you can't make it to the live class, don't worry. It will be recorded and you can listen to it later on. In fact, all the classes that I've done through SYS Select are recorded and are available to SYS members to watch anytime they'd like. This class will actually complete the entire screenwriting process. I've done classes on how to choose a marketable concept all the way through to writing the opening pages of your screenplay, the first act, the second act, and now the third act too. Again, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/classes to learn more. Once again, I want to thank Screencraft for sponsoring this episode. They're currently accepting submissions for their pilot drama teleplay contest. So if you've written an original drama for television, this is a great way to get some attention on it. They have a great lineup of judges who all have many years of experience in television. The deadline for entry is September 1st. Check out screencraft.org if you have a drama teleplay you'd like to enter. If you're listening to this after the September 1st deadline, don't worry. They run different contests all the time, and we'll be doing another one like this next year. So do check out the site for the latest contests that they're running. Again, that's screencraft.org. In the next episode of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Caitlin Brown. Caitlin is actually an up-and-coming screenwriter. I wanted to get her on the show because she's had some real success through contests, and I wanted to hear from her about how that's helped her career. I'm always getting people asking me if they should enter a contest, so I figured hearing from someone who's actually had success with contests would be about the best answer I could offer. So stay tuned for that episode next week. So in this week's Writing Words section, I just want to talk about a few things that Brian touched on. I get a lot of emails from people who don't live in LA, and for whatever reason, they really can't move to LA. I still maintain that it's very, very helpful to move to LA if you can. But Brian is proof that you can succeed without it. So hopefully this is inspiring to people who are trying to break in from outside of Hollywood. Brian is really shows that it definitely can be done. I want to point out something that Brian said too. He's got dozens of professional credits. I would highly advise you to look at his IMDb page to get a sense of just how many great credits he has. And I thought it was very interesting that he said even to this day, when things get slow, he always goes back to places like Inktip and tries to get new projects going. I feel like a lot of new screenwriters have this misconception that once they get a credit or two, everything will just be smooth sailing. And it just doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, it's just not that simple. You've always got to be hustling and marketing your material. And this is exactly the situation I find myself in. I've got a bunch of credits, but those credits really haven't opened up a ton of doors for me. So I'm still marketing like mad, basically trying to break in over and over again. And this is the reality of the industry. If you're going to be successful, you're going to have to keep marketing pretty much forever. Also, listen very closely to what Brian said about networking. I think that's a great story about befriending the lowly assistant who eventually became someone who could hire Brian to write a script. This is not something that's going to pay dividends quickly, but this is the sort of networking that is hugely important. It doesn't matter who you're dealing with. Always treat people with respect and get to know anyone and everyone, because you just never know who's going to be the head of development in the years to come. So that's our show. Thanks for listening.